lump of clay and he begins to work it. Listen, the nation of Israel had lived under Babylonian captivity. They were there because they were disobedient to God in their lives. They had allowed worldly impurities to mingle into their lives. Listen, you see, you don't need to necessarily jump right into sin face first in order to weaken your relationship with God. It begins with a little mingling here and there, a compromise of holy standards in your life. And over time, you desensitize your relationship with God and the holiness of His Word in your life. It doesn't happen all at once. You see, you don't just wake up one day and you find yourself, in God's presence one day and a filthy sinner the next. It's a process. And the enemy knows exactly what he's doing. You see, a little compromise in our life. This is not so bad. All the things that were bad at one time all of a sudden are no longer bad. You find yourself in that generation today? The things that were sin, we're not calling them sin anymore. It's just, the way interpretation we're saying. That's not so bad. Now you begin to mingle a little bit. Once you compromise, mingling becomes part of the process. And over the course of time, you're mingling, your process has moved you away from the hand of the Creator. And we find ourselves far from the will of God. You see, God's people who were called by His name became idol worshippers, pacifiers of pagan lusts in their lives. They chose ungodly kings to rule them, and according to their own sinful ways, they built for themselves high places of contamination with ungodly nations. They were abominations before God because they defiled the altar and they defiled the offering that they were putting there. Listen, a nation to whom God has promised His blessing may forfeit its preferred status through disobedience. God can bless a nation, God can call a nation, God can fill that nation with His glory, but if that nation begins to walk away from the will of God, from the call of God, you can forfeit the will of God, the blessing of God in your life. Listen, Christian, this is for you and I. God takes us and He cleans us up. He calls us. He puts a purpose in our life. He gives to us a heavenly name within ourselves. He identifies us with us. But if we walk away from God, we forfeit all the blessings, all the promises that God has ordained for our lives. Did you know that? And so we find, Christians that they were walking with God at one time. They were so filled with the power of God. God was using them in a mighty way. They begin to walk away from God. They begin to leave the presence of God. They begin to mingle with the world and worldly things in their lives. And what happens is sin forfeits the blessing of God in their lives. That can happen. This is why, as remembering that we are the clay and He is the potter, we need to continuously be in the potter's hand. Oftentimes, a bad decision leads to another, a little compromise, a little drifting, and unless we come back to the hand of the potter to work out the imperfections, we become hardened to His word and we lose focus of the cross in our life. Listen. When you lose focus of the cross, you become spiritually disoriented, and the enemy pounces in and takes you hostage under your own sin. Do you know what to become spiritually disoriented means? It means you come to a point when you can't tell what's right and wrong anymore. You come to a point where you can't tell the presence of God to the presence of the enemy. You come to a point where you don't hear God's voice anymore. You come to a point where in your walk, you don't know if you're going the right way anymore. Is anybody listening this morning? You come to a point in your life where you're not really sure where you are. You're not confident of God's saving grace in your life any longer. And before you know it, you're not sure. Why? Because you lost focus of it. It's the cross that gives us direction in our life. Listen, if you ever lose your way, if you ever think that you're not going the right, focus on the cross, my friend. The cross is our direction. The cross we need to focus on the cross as sinners. And so when you become disoriented spiritually, the first thing that happens is you lose focus of the cross. You're not really sure what's right or wrong. You're not sure who's Lord of your life anymore. You're not sure where you're going. The cross.